Alright, seat back. The most frustrating thing is going to be these. They require the most force. There is a spring-loaded clip on one side, so you've got to navigate the anchor well rearward a little bit to unload that clip, lift it up, and then see how the cutout is, slide it forward after it's past that clip that you'll probably break to get it out. I tried depressing the clip as I was lifting, but all three of them broke. Anyways, the clip retains part of the upholstery through that hole. Now to start removing the upholstery itself. Lift up the bottom of the shroud. And there's a plastic U-channel and then a plastic strip that slides into that U-channel. It just kind of makes a hook on itself. So you start lifting that out and it will continue to just come free. That's pretty easy. And I swear I've done enough of these. I need a wearable camera. You got a clip there, and then there's a hidden clip there. So get your body panel fork and get under them snug before you lift. There's the hidden clip there in the fabric. It's only on either side of the latch. The opposite side does not have a hidden clip. Then you have these rails that'll unhook from the pan. And then from there comes the next tricky part. You don't get this until you get some slack from the other side, and then it'll slip over that without overstretching the fabric. The fabric actually stretches over these, but you've got to reach your hand under the upholstery around the corner and start the stretch, and then you can work it around each hole and pull it off. I forgot to remove that. Stand by. If you pry the cover from the rear, there's actually two nice little recesses that your screwdriver will slip into to help remove the plastic without damaging it. Then you got your two anchor screws for the seatbelt guide. Alright, seatbelt guide is off. The fabric may have self-bonded to the metal, so make sure you stress relieve that a little bit before you start stretching and pulling at the other holes. This is what I was talking about, reaching up inside. Just loosen up the fabric from the foam and stretch it over the headrest posts first before you start to free up the corners. It'll give you more slack. The post without the lock goes a bit easier, so I might be able to show you. I definitely need a wearable camera. There it goes. Now, take your time. Don't try to stretch the fabric too much, that way it'll lay nice on the new seat. The release button bezel is the largest diameter. It's going to need the most stretch. You'll have to get both hands fully into it. That said, none of those locations are terrible, and now you've got enough slack to start working the corners loose, and you'll be able to pull it over to the front and expose the hog rings from one side. Once one corner is free, you've got lots of slack. The other corner will come loose real easy. I started with the softest corner, which is the outside corner. The the backing of the foam seems to have a lot more give to let you get it off, whereas it's really rigid where one seat back meets the other seat back. Now we've exposed the hog rings, but before we go and undo them, let's finish unwrapping the bottom side. We've created a lot of slack by freeing it down to the hog rings, so we can pull it over this pivot pin here after unwrapping the corner. Let's unwrap the opposite corner first to give us more slack for that pivot pin. And now it should just slip right over. I've seen a few seats that didn't have this plastic sleeve here. It mostly reduces vibration. But the car that didn't have it still didn't make much noise in the back. I mean, it's a pan covered with foam. I think it's self-insulating. But if yours is missing, don't fret about it. Now we've exposed the hog rings from both sides. It's the only thing holding the seat back on now. So you can work from whatever side you prefer. And you'll see there's 1, 2, 3. In older cars and a lot of vehicles I worked in, hog rings have been a pain because you really have to compress the upholstery to rotate them and get them loose. But these ones really aren't too bad. And I'll show you the trick. So rotate the hog ring until you can pinch it right before the end of the ring. And that way you can shove a screwdriver in and twist it and open up that gap. They're really soft. It's pretty easy, especially since you don't have to compress the foam very much on this seat to do so. So there it is. The screwdriver went between that gap. You held it still with the pliers, twisted the hog ring. And you go ahead and repeat that step for the remaining hog rings. And then you can rotate them to where they thread themselves off, and it should come right off after that. If there's any foam in the way of the hog ring twisting out, just twist through it and plow through. It'll come free. Just like that. And then that'll leave you with your hog ring locations. If you're putting upholstery back on, maybe it'll help you to dig out some foam just to make it easier to thread them in. Just enough so the hog ring slips through the loop without fighting you too much. And that's about it. Once you go put it back on, you'll thread the hog rings back through the wire, and then you just pinch them shut. They're really soft. And that should be it. Install is the reverse of removal, and actually the small one was a little bit tighter, so it was a little bit more difficult, even though there was less stuff to remove. Just another observation. You can tell that this upholstery was steam cleaned at one time because the stain residue migrates towards where the pieces of upholstery touch other parts of the seat, and also the residue migrates towards stitchings and seams. So overall the seat looks fairly good. The customer is going to be happy with it, but it has been steam cleaned, so I'm offering them full transparency on that. Just a quick recap on the tools needed for this job. We got a flathead screwdriver to spread hog rings, as well as a needle nose pliers. Longer nose is better, but I managed to get it with a snub nose. A Phillips screwdriver for the seatbelt guide screws, and an interior panel clip fork. Next will be the lower seat pan. Okay, lower seat pan. This one's looks like mostly hog rings. I think there's about 30 of them. I don't have a wearable camera, and once you've seen one, you've seen all. So I'm not going to film the hog rings. I'm going to skip right to the fabric removal in just a second. I'm taking a moment to mark the hog ring locations in a hidden portion of the upholstery, just to make it easier for reassembly. Two more observations here. These hog rings are wrapped in plastic, and I'm going to take a guess that the reason they do that is so that they don't create rust spots that crawl through the upholstery when they make contact with the support wire. I've seen that a lot in cars in the past. The other observation to make is that I'm doing all the easy, even contour stuff first to give slack. When I get into the funky contour locations, having more slack will reduce the chances of me tearing the upholstery. Case in point, there's a bit of rust here in the frame, but the amount of rust that transferred to the hog ring and the support wire on the upholstery is very, very minimal. Now, if you already have a bag of hog rings, I highly suggest that you just save yourself some trouble and take a wire cutter and snap all these off and use new hog rings. Easier on the hands, get done faster. So I freed up all the hog rings around the even contour. Now we're about to get to this weird stuff where the hog rings actually go through fabric itself with no support wire. So I'm going to partially unwrap this to remove a lot of tension on those so that I don't have any chance of tearing the fabric as I remove those rings. And I'm going to probably just cut them to reduce the chance of tearing the fabric even more. Alright, so you can see how fatigued the fabric gets when there isn't a support wire. So reduce the stress on those. I cut them. Cut the hog rings so that I wasn't going to tear the fabric trying to twist the hog ring. Takes a really strong pair of wire cutters. Now we can begin to unwrap. And there will be lots more hog rings. Pretty much anywhere you see a seam on the seat pan. So, of course, the seat pan is a chore, and you'll probably have to compress the foam a bit to get to these hog rings. Okay, for the top side, save yourself a lot of trouble. Get a long reach, really strong wire cutter. You'll come along here. You'll get this top row first. It's going to wrap all the way around those edges there. Then that'll allow you the flexibility to get the sides. Once you get the sides, you can flip those up to the middle. You can get the middle. It is so much easier than trying to untwist all those hog rings. Buy a bunch of hog rings and an assembly. Start with the middle row first. You won't be able to access it after you do anything else. Then you'll get this row right here, and you'll get the outside row. Once you know that your entire bottom is done, then start securing the back corner. This back corner closes everything off. You will not be able to reach these hog rings in the middle or on these bars here once you have done it. So make sure that everything's snug and secure before you do this. After that, wrap around the edges, and then you can get the easy access hog rings, putting it back on.